Hello and welcome back to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel where I teach online psychology lessons for my wonderful students. Today we're carrying on with the unit of memory and we're looking at lesson 8, accuracy of eyewitness testimony, anxiety. Let's get started. Starter. Most eyewitnesses brought to court may have witnessed a terrible crime. This, no doubt, will cause the witness anxiety. It is not clear whether anxiety makes eyewitness recall better or worse. There is research to support both possibilities. Stressful situations create anxiety. Crimes and accidents are no exception. When we witness such events, we experience physiological and psychological changes that could affect what we later remember. Last lesson we looked at the role of misleading information, leading questions and post-event discussion on the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. In today's lesson we turn our attention to the second major factor that can affect the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, anxiety. So we've got 3 learning objectives today. We're going to look at anxiety has a negative effect on recall, research by Johnson and Scott. Anxiety has a positive effect on recall, Yuille and Cutshall, and then we're going to discuss and evaluate eyewitness testimony in terms of anxiety. Let's start with learning objective 1. Anxiety has a negative effect on recall according to Johnson and Scott 1976. Here's the procedure. Participants sat in a waiting room believing they were going to take part in a lab study. In the low anxiety condition, participants heard a casual conversation and then saw a man walk through the waiting room carrying a pen with grease on his hands. In the high anxiety condition, a heated argument was accompanied by the sound of breaking glass. A man then walked through the room holding a knife covered in blood. Creates anxiety and weapon focus. Participants were later asked to pick the man from a set of 50 photographs. What percent of participants in the low anxiety condition and what percent of high anxiety participants were able to identify the man? Well, 49% of participants in the low anxiety condition and 33% of high anxiety participants were able to identify the man. In conclusion, the tunnel theory of memory argues that the presence of a weapon caused attention to be drawn towards the weapon itself and away from other things such as the person's face. So this research by Johnson and Scott suggests that anxiety has a negative effect on recall. Here's an application question. Football hooligans. Train passengers travelling home after a football match witnessed the fight among rival supporters in one of the carriages. One of the supporters drew a knife and threatened a fan from the other team. Passengers who witnessed the incident were asked by police to look at a series of photographs to identify the supporters involved in the confrontation. From your knowledge of the negative effects of anxiety and recall, what advice can you give the police about whether they can expect passengers to correctly identify the fans? Pause the question, pause the video, answer the question, write it down please. Here's the answer. Findings from lab studies such as Johnson and Scott suggest that accurate recall of the supporters' identities would be poorer due to the presence of the knife. The weapon focus effect predicts that the passenger's attention would be focused on the knife rather than features of the scene, such as the faces of those involved in the fight. And that's how anxiety can have a negative effect on recall. Can you identify one thing you learned from this piece of research? Why do you think learning about this is important? How does this apply in real life? What was the hardest part to understand about this? And do you have any questions? If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments and maybe I'll get to them and maybe another viewer will answer them. And that's learning objective 1 done. That's how anxiety can have a negative effect on recall. We're going to have a look at research on how anxiety can have a positive effect on recall. Yuille and Cutshall, 1986. There is an alternative argument that says high anxiety creates more enduring and accurate memories. Here's the procedure. In an actual crime, a gun shop owner shot a thief dead. There were 21 witnesses and 13 of these 21 agreed to participate in the study. What was the procedure? Participants were interviewed 4 to 5 months after the incident. The information recalled was compared to the police interviews at the time of the shooting. Witnesses rated how stressed they felt at the time of the incident as well. Here are the findings. Witnesses were very accurate in what they recalled, and there was little change after 5 months. Participants who reported the highest levels of stress were most accurate, about 88% accurate compared to 75% accurate for those that were less stressed. So in conclusion, anxiety does not appear to reduce the accuracy of eyewitness testimony for a real world event, and may even enhance it. So there is conflicting evidence in this idea. Here's the hooligan question again. Train passengers travelling home after a football match witnessed a fight amongst rival supporters in one of the carriages. One of the supporters drew a knife and threatened a fan from the other team. Passengers who witnessed the incident were asked by police to look at the series of photographs to identify the supporters involved in the confrontation. Now, from your knowledge of the positive effects of anxiety on recall, what advice can you give to the police about whether they can expect passengers to correctly identify the fans? Pause it again, get your answer down. Here's the answer. Interviews with real-life witnesses of a gun shop owner shooting a thief found that those who reported high levels of stress and anxiety showed the highest levels of recall, meaning some passengers may be able to correctly identify the fighting fans, especially if they were directly threatened. And that's how anxiety can have a positive effect on recall. Can you identify one thing you've learned? Why do you think it's important to learn this? What was the hardest part to understand, and do you have any questions? Write them down, feel free to ask me. And those are the positive effects that anxiety can have on recall. Let's have a look at evaluation now. What are some of the strengths and limitations of accuracy of eyewitness testimony anxiety? One limitation is that anxiety may not be relevant to weapon focus. Johnson and Scott's participants may have focused on the weapon not because they were anxious, but because they were surprised. Pickle in 1998 found accuracy in identifying the criminal was poorest when the object in their hand was unexpected. For example, raw chicken and a gun in a hairdresser's, both unusual. This suggests the weapon's effect is due to unusualness rather than anxiety or threat, and so tells us nothing about the specific effects on recall of anxiety on recall. So it's suggesting that it's not the fact that people feel anxious that they don't remember the person, it's the fact that it's something unusual in their hand. So the fact that they're holding something unusual, that gets the focus, they don't look at the face, and that's why they don't remember it. And it's got nothing to do with anxiety, is what Pickle is arguing. So this is conflicting evidence, so it is a limitation. One strength is supporting evidence for negative effects. Valentine and Massoud used heart rate, objective measure, to divide visitors to the London Dungeons labyrinth into low and high anxiety groups. High anxiety participants were less accurate than low anxiety in describing and identifying a target person. This supports the claim that anxiety has a negative effect on immediate eyewitness recall on a stressful event. So there is supporting evidence that anxiety can have a negative effect on recall. Another strength is supporting evidence for the positive effects though. Christensen and Hubinett interviewed actual witnesses to bank robberies. Some were direct victims, high anxiety, and others were just bystanders, less anxiety. They found more than 75% accurate recall across all witnesses. Direct victims, the most anxious group, were even more accurate. This suggests that anxiety does not affect the accuracy of eyewitness recall and may even enhance it. So this is supporting evidence that anxiety can have a positive effect on recall. So, can you summarize each evaluator point into your own words? If you want to challenge yourself, summarize the evaluator points into exactly 10 words. And that's learning objective 3 done. Here's the plenary. Here's a couple videos. Follow these links for extracts from a BBC programme about eyewitness testimony. If you just go into YouTube and you type in BBC Forensics Eyewitness Testimony, it can show you these two things, and it can show you how eyewitness testimonies may be affected by anxiety. Otherwise, that was the penultimate lesson to the memory unit. It was lesson 8, accuracy of eyewitness testimony, anxiety. The final lesson of the unit is next lesson, lesson 9, improving the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, cognitive interview. Well done, my neo-psychologists. Great job today. Keep up the good work. God bless and peace.
I'm feeling like Will, I feel like a prince, I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills, cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels, I wanted to flex, they told me to chill. I'm making a flip, my life is a flick, now load up the film.